Happy Sabbath, church. So, while I was doing this sermon, I remembered, or I was reminded rather, that this month is Mental Health Awareness. But I never remember. And it was Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. So, I never knew that there was such a thing. I didn't remember that there was such a thing. So, halfway through that sermon, I decided to throw in some mental health thing. But then I remembered also that tomorrow, apparently, is Father's Day. I never put none of that in there because it would have been 3 sermons. So I was still weighing my mind up until this morning, or up until just a while ago, which sermon, they both have the same titles, but don't worry. So last week we started going through a series, What Are You Standing On? Last week we looked at someone being stuck on the fence. And we came away from that with the understanding that indecision is a decision. In deciding to not choose, you have inherently chosen. The only difficulty with that is that you have chosen the wrong side. And today's Bible class, or this morning's Bible study, as well as last week's in the afternoon, the idea is that we are saved to serve, and the idea of waiting is actively waiting. And so today's sermon, we want to look at being blinded by love, but bound by lust. And so you will see, it's not here though, but there would have been a nice little graphic for you to see. So we want to turn to Judges 13. And I'll be reading verse 5 of Judges 13. Or better yet, I'll read verse 4 to 6 for context. While you find it, I will take this opportunity to welcome those who are joining us online. Whether it's your first, second, or third time. And for those of you in here who are worshiping with us for the first time, I look to my right and I see Ryan Blake recently decided to recommit. Welcome to this side of the vineyard, brother. It's been a minute. So Judges 13 verse 5 starts, or verse 4 rather, starts by saying, "So then be careful not to drink wine nor strong drink, and do not eat anything unclean." Why? "Because you will conceive and bear a son. No razor will touch his head, because the boy will be a Nazarite of God from birth. And it is he who will begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines." And so the woman came and told her husband, saying, "A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask him from whence he came, and he did not tell me his name." But the part that I want you to focus on is 13 verse 5, where it says, "He will begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines." You see, at that point in time, Israel did not yet have a king. Israel was just coming from the land of bondage. We're talking about Egypt. And so they were more of a theocratic nation. They didn't have a king. They had a high priest. And so each man during Judges, one of the things that you'll find in the book of Judges, it says, "And in those days there were no king, comma, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes." That's not necessarily a good thing. That's one of the verses that I don't necessarily like. And then there's another one that says, "But at a certain time," you know trouble that is. So typically there's trouble when that happens. And so it was. These verses, when you hear them, you begin to think what's going to happen. But in the long corridors of biblical history, few figures are as perplexing and as tragic as Samson. He was a man born with a divine assignment, full of promise and power, yet he was undone by his passions. He could kill lions and conquer armies, yet he couldn't control his own appetite. Who tell us I'm no blow? Was my colorblind? Okay. So he was undone by his own passions. Most times when we go to look at the story of Samson and Delilah, we make the assumption that Delilah, you know that song, right? Them say man wicked, but woman, Delilah, you know that song? Oh, so much I don't know that song. All right. For all the honest ones that says they know it. But he could kill lions and conquer armies, yet he couldn't control his own appetite. Samson's Nazirite vow required him to abstain from wine, avoid dead bodies, and never cut his hair. These were more than ancient rituals. They were boundaries. These were boundaries that were designed to keep him spiritually sharp and mentally grounded. Let us pray. Eternal Father and our God, as we come before your presence once more, we want to empty ourselves of ourselves, dear God, so that we may be filled with your Holy Spirit. Continue to guide and make it so that these words that will leave from this podium will be coming directly from your throne, dear Father, so that your people who are waiting on a blessing will in fact be blessed as we seek to glorify you and edify each other. Bless us to this end. Forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. He was called to deliver others, but he could not deliver himself from himself. And therein lies the issue with Samson. And as we observe this particular month, Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, Samson's story becomes more than just a biblical tale. It becomes a mirror. It becomes a mirror showing us that many men today are like Samson. Here's where we're going. They are strong in public, but they are silently unraveling in private. Because men wear a burden. Men wear a burden, and sometimes that burden is difficult to unpack or to understand because we typically don't talk about it. And there's this part now. Samson was a Nazirite. It means that he was literally separated to God. And Samson, if we saw him, the possibility existed that he would have looked a particular way. He might have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or even more locks. And that's why I say or even more, but all right, that's another thing. So usually in this day and age, if we saw a man with 7 locks, we will not classify him as a Nazirite. We'll say he's a madman. Natty, because him here look matty. All right? And I remember, because growing up, I did not think that there was any biblical underpinning, because you have a particular group of people who saw it fit to have this particular kind of hairstyle. And so I remember having this conversation, and I wasn't one to say daddy, I would say Naya. And I would ask the question, why your hair stay this way? Why your hair have this locks? Why this look this way? And you kill him with whys. And instead of sitting down and just having the conversation casually, you call me, you sit me down, and you turn to Numbers chapter 6. And it would start by, he would say Jase, but the book says Yahweh. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when a man or a woman takes a special vow, a vow of Nazirite, or a vow of separation, to keep separate for Yahweh, he will abstain from wine and fermented drinks. He will not drink the wine vinegar or vinegar of fermented drink. He will not drink the fruit juice of grapes or eat fresh or dry grapes. That means raisin as well. All the days of his separation, you will not eat anything or from anything that is made of the grapevine, from sour grapes to the skin of grapes. All the days of the vow of his separation, a razor will not pass over his head until fulfilling the days that he separated himself to Yahweh. He will be holy and grow long the locks of the hair of his head. All the days of keeping himself separated for Yahweh, he will not go to a person who is dead. For even his father, mother, brother, or sister, he will not make himself unclean by their death, because the separation to his God is on his head. He will be holy for Yahweh all the days of his separation. I remember coming home one day and saw a bald-headed man in the house that looked kind of like my father. And it was surprising because there was a burlap bag with a full head of hair and his head was shine. And so I asked him, what happened? Because this morning when he left, a full-fledged Rastaman left out of the house, but a bald head came in. And my father always burned fire and bald head. Fire upon room, fire upon ballad, fire upon scissors, fire upon comb. You burn all those things. And so it was surprising when he came home and I saw that he had this. And we confronted him and I asked what was the issue. It so happened that his employer was ill and he was the only one at work. And the man died in his arms. And as soon as what we would call, I guess, on TV, you hear them, we call them paramedics. But when the coroner came, as soon as they took up the body and put him in the thing, Father just went in and just grabbed the closest sharp implement that he saw and just trim, because you hold the dead. And he was a firm believer of letting the dead bury their dead. And so his vow was broken. His vow was broken and he came back and he went through his rituals. Mind you, he wasn't strict, because I'm almost sure that I saw him with grapes. But that's another story, you know. No, not a sellout. Just showing that none of us were perfect when we were keeping that particular vow. But that was the first time I saw him doing that. And there was another time, and it was literally the same thing. And he grew it back again. But long and short, what am I saying? I'm saying that during that time, he was contemplative. During that time, he was sitting, he was struggling, and he was wondering, because we're talking about someone who, as far as he would have said to me, he started saying Rasta from teens. I was born when he was in his 40s. So, food for thought is a whole heap of decades before I even became a thought that he would have been sporting his precepts, as he would have called them. And so, he had his own agonies. He was unraveling in private for whatever reason, because he would not have understood why Jah would have allowed him to be the only person there at that point in time to witness and be a part of this particular thing, because the dead should bury their dead. All right? And bringing us back now, we want to look at Samson, we want to look at men, and we want to look at the fact that as men sometimes, most times, we're strong in public, but we're silently unraveling in private. And so I want to look at the man with a calling but without control. And we want to speak about how early, unchecked emotional impulses will set the stage for long-term breakdown. In Judges 14, verses 1 to 3, it says that I have seen a woman, now get her for me. From the very beginning, Samson's downfall begins not with a Philistine sword, but with a glance. He sees a woman and demands her without prayer, without counsel, without discernment. His motivation, she pleases me well. And I'm imagining that Samson, if he was anything like John, let me say like John. Yes, if he was anything like me, he would have been looking, and when he saw her, he probably would have looked at her skin. And I'm imagining that it would have been soft, it would have been supple, it would have bounced the sunlight from off of it. And whether or not she had edges or curves, it's irrelevant to him. She looked pleasing to the eyes. And so there would have been a particular gait in her steps, and each step would have drawn him a little closer to her. He was looking, he was scanning from head to toe and then back again, probably a little too long, and so he sent and asked for her. She pleaseth me well, she looked good. And the possibility exists that she would have. He didn't pray for her, church. He just wanted her. And that's not discernment. That's desire pretending to be destiny. And then he slowly took steps towards her because he wanted her to want him. She had an agenda, he had a desire. And when a misaligned agenda comes in touch with a desire that's not from God, trouble. Nothing good will come from that. It's trouble. And so when we get to 14, I'll read 1 to 3 again. It says, and Samson went down to Timnah, and there he saw a woman from the daughters of the Philistine. He went up and told his father and mother, and he said, I saw a woman in Timnah from the daughters of the Philistines. So then take her for me as a wife. But his father and his mother said to him, is there not a wife among the daughters of your relatives, or among all your people, that you must take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? I remember being called that. But Samson said to his father, take her for me because she pleases me well. This was a man, or better yet, this was a child in a man's body who had unbridled passion. It was unchecked. Daddy, get her for me because she pleases me well. And so that started what invariably would have been Samson's downfall. Most times when you look at the story, we blame Delilah for some things. I'm not saying that she's innocent. I'm not saying that she's innocent, no. But when we get to verse 8, and he returned after a while to marry this woman, and he turned aside to see the carcass, the dead body of the lion. And there was a swarm of wild honeybees in the body of the lion, and honey. And he scraped it onto his hand, and he went on eating it as he went. And he went to his father and mother and gave some to them, and they ate it. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the body of the lion. You remember the vow, right? What was that lion? That lion was dead. Not just dead, very dead. All right? That was a carcass. The lion was very dead. All right? And this moment marks the first quiet compromise. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. That's how many of us fall. Not in one big crash, but in 1,000 little cracks. And he breaks a part of his vow and he says nothing. Unprocessed guilt, hidden behavior, and spiritual erosion. That's what we have to look at. You can be anointed, friends, and still undisciplined. You can have a calling and you can still be out of control, even though you have that calling. Calling is not control. God give you a mind, or God gave you a mind, and he expects you, for whatever reason, he expects you to use it. And so Samson, we see here, was emotionally reactive, and he pursued pleasure over purpose, and he sought validation over values. And today, men are told to man up, but never to show, but never shown how to heal up. And so the wounds stayed buried until they start bleeding into other areas of our lives. As men, there are times when we come to church and you feel a little weird, and it's not because you're tired. Emotionally, you might be drained or something. You have a little struggle. Girl has stressed you. Or you have stressed your girl and it's being returned to you. She returned into sender. But long and short, some stressing go on, and you never feel 200. And you start to talk, my babe, say, yeah, are you a girl? And that's not what we would say in Patois, you know? And so you feel as though you're going to be judged if you share that kind of information, depending on who you share it with and where you share it with. Because sometimes, if me, Cassie, John, Leighton, and all of us are out there, depending on who else is there and the vibe that we're in, you can say certain things and you get away with it. No one will card you. But there are other times when you say it to the same set of friends, And everybody laugh, and so you feel a little way, but you're a man, you go man up. Right, Leighton? You go man up, and you're not really say nothing. You just hold it. But impulse without introspection will lead invariably to implosion. And a man without reflection becomes a man without direction. It sounds like a whole heap of rhyme. So when men don't pause the process, they become powerful, yes, but they also become dangerous. And they become dangerous to others, usually those in their closest circles, and then they become dangerous to themselves. How many of us do you know that we started out good, we got great, and then when the power started to come our way, we got corrupted to the point where you don't recognize us because we don't know what we don't remember that person that we used to be. Boy, Kwame did cool when we just meet him, but him hype, him well hype. You know, or something about somebody, any random man. So we see this now leads us to the erosion of strength, and this is what we call the cost of unchecked compromise. All right? This erosion of the strength that we have is often emotional and it's incremental. It's not one big swoop. It's fatigue. It's not failure that broke Samson. And we normally assume that Samson just failed one time. No, it was fatigue. And there's a word that I love to use. We say you're fatiguing. There's this gnawing thing about an individual that slowly gnaws at you, bit by bit. Just imagine you lying down and you're lying under a leaky roof and it's raining and there's nowhere else to go because that's where the least amount of water is falling, but every now and again, drip right in your forehead. Drip, just one drip at a time. And slowly it gnaws at you. That's fatigue. That was Delilah. But that's fatigue. And so we move now to Judges 16. And I'm reading verse 6 all the way to verse 16 of chapter 6. Well, 16 rather. So Judges 16, verse 6 to 16. That's where I'll be going. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what makes your strength so great and with what can you be tied up to subdue you? And Samson said to her, if you tie me up with 7 fresh bowstrings that are not dried up, I will become weak like everyone else. So the rulers of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings that were not dried up, and she tied him up with them. Then the ambush was sitting in wait for her in an inner room, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he snapped the bowstrings, just as flax fiber snaps when it comes close to fire. And the secret of his strength remained unknown. And Delilah said to Samson, look, and just imagine now, because she's annoying. You have mocked me, and you told me lies, Samson. Please tell me how you can be bound. And he said to her, if they tie me tightly with new ropes that have not been used, I will become weak and be like everyone else. So Delilah took new ropes and tied him up with them. And she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. The ambush was sitting in an inner room, but he snapped them with his arms like thread. And Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and you have told me lies. Tell me, how can you be bound? And he said to her, if you weave 7 locks of my head with warped threads. She fastened it with the pin and said to him, the Philistines are bound upon you, Samson. You notice we're getting closer, right? And Samson woke up from his sleep and tore loose the loom pin from the web and the warped threads. And she said to him, how can you say, I love you, when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me how your strength is. How is it so great? And because she nagged him day in, day out with her words, she pestered him. It says his soul grew vexed. His soul grew impatient to the point of death. So you have nagging. Then you have Delilah nagging. And a regular nagging that, you know. Now, Samson clearly was strong because I probably would have run. After the first 2 times, I'm going back home. Mommy, daddy, I can't manage up this up because... But there must have been something about Delilah though, you know. Church, it wasn't just about the sex. It wasn't just about that. It seldom ever is just about that, Lisa. It's a case whereby there's something about her. It probably was the way she walked, yes, the way she talked, the way she looked, the way she felt. But, Lisa, the power of the P. Persuasion, church. Persuasion. Your minds. So, it was about emotional manipulation. It was about mental weariness and psychological warfare. Delilah wasn't strong, but she was patient. And she was persistent. And when left unguarded, Samson surrendered because she was persistent. And when she was left unguarded, she led Samson directly to surrender. So Delilah didn't defeat Samson with force. She defeated him with fatigue. How many of you watch Family Matters with Steve Urkel and him say, oh, I'm wearing you down. You remember that? That was Delilah. And that's what she did to the strongest man that the Bible has ever spoken about. So men today do not necessarily have a Delilah in their beds, but many have emotional pressures on their backs. So sometimes, just sometimes, you can ask, brother, you good? You know, or what go on fear, man, or the family, or how something. You see, the expectation to be unshakable, unfailing, and unbothered, it became a burden as opposed to a badge of honor. I remember being here, and someone said to me, why you always look so? And it was funny when she did it the way that she did. She did her head this. You know, you girls have the tendency to do it sometimes. And she said, why you always a laugh? I said, not always a laugh. But you're always smiling. There's a difference. So, not trouble you. Yeah. But you're always a smile. So how am I supposed to look? Because this is my resting face. This is my resting face. And some people have a resting face that is sour. Yes, thank you for that word. So unchecked compromise leads to burnout. Without outlets, whether in prayer, whether in therapy or community, men fall not from sin, but from exhaustion. Somewhere on a sin we sin why we fall. Sometimes we're exhausted and we can't bother. Because there's an expectation that no matter what, you ought to show up, you ought to be unshakable, you ought to be immovable because you are a man. Full stop. Yeah, ball for. What to you? Move from here, someone. Yeah. Going like I was looking for that word. You're going like you're a sissy. So, we don't fall because we're weak, we fall because we're weary. And many of us as men are being seduced and we're being slowly suffocated because that's Delilah. Delilah's thighs weren't just for show. So disconnection now becomes more dangerous than defeat, because from Samson's numbness, we see a mirror. And this mirror is about the silent, spiritual, and emotional shutdown that is there for today's men. We literally just shut down because we can't bother. There is this expectations that we can't meet. Because we don't know how a healed man look, because we have never seen a healed man. But you women expect us to be healed. But you have baggage. And you have expectations that comes with those baggage. And so we are supposed to be healing you. But you're not reciprocating sometimes. And I'm not saying that you're mean. I'm just saying that sometimes you don't know what to do. But rather than acknowledging that none of us know what to do and then we go to God together, we expect you to, because you're a priest, and you're a provider, and you're a protector, and you're all of them other things there. And I am the passenger princess. Those are the only two P's that you will hold. That's unfair. Yeah, laugh after me. Verse 20 says, and the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he woke up from his sleep and said, I will go out just like every other time and shake myself free. But he did not know. There's this thing that we have, we call it blind spots, especially for those who drive. The A pillar, the C pillar in the car, you can't see anything right there because it's in your line of sight, depending on where you're looking. You don't know what's there. And sometimes in our knowledge, there are gaps. We can call those blind spots, where we don't know what we don't know. And with Samson's case, he was at a blind spot. He didn't know what he didn't know because in his mind, he still have him 7 locks. Delilah did something to him the night before and he was so exhausted that he did not know that she was in his hair, cutting through every single locks. He never wake up light. After that, he couldn't wake up light. He had married to her and he was doing he was fulfilling his marital duty, his conjugal rights. And so he was tired, he was exhausted because it's Delilah we're talking about, she kind of heavy. And emotionally she was kind of heavy, you know, and so she unleashed all of that stress on him. And so she was able to get into his hair because she was already in his head. And she snip, 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 snip. And so, but he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. This perhaps is the most haunting verse in Samson's entire history. He gets up and he shakes himself as before, expecting the same results. But God had left and he didn't even realize. He got so used to functioning without God that he didn't notice when God had stopped functioning through him. So many of us here, men, women, functionally depressed. So you get up every morning and you just do what you're supposed to do because you're supposed to do it and because it's what you have been doing all this time. You've never stopped to wonder if you are good. And this is man and woman now, human. And you go through the motion because you can't sit down, you're supposed to do it. Because the possibility exists. For example, like me, if I wasn't here, chances are I would have been right there. Because if I sat down, I probably would have started to sleep. And so he got so used to functioning without God that he didn't realize that God had stopped functioning through him. How many of us here today are just going through the motions? We're just doing church because that's what we have always been doing. Not because we have a relationship that we have been nurturing and we have been paying attention to that relationship that we have with God, but because we have always just been here. And we don't realize that when we got up and we decided to come to church, we left God right there waiting for us to come to him, to have that one talk with him. And it didn't have to be long. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 3. It could have been 1. It could have been morning, God, big of yourself. It could have been that. Or it could have been God save me. But we got up and we just left. This is the danger of what we call chronic performance. Many of us, many men perform well at work. Many of us perform well at church. Many of us perform well in marriage. Many of us perform well in ministry. But inside, the lights are off. We know how to put on a good show. Spiritual numbness is often more fatal than moral failure. Because we are, yes, moral beings, but we are spiritual beings. And if we are morally sound, but we are not spiritually connected or we are spiritually numb, then it's just a matter of time before we just become an empty shell that has something that seems like a form of godliness, but we have denied the power therein. There's no life. So we keep going. We keep thinking that motion equals meaning, but when we keep moving without emotional and spiritual refueling, then burnout becomes inevitable. This is something that I've always asked about. When we come and we pour, when do we get the opportunity to go aside and be poured into? Because just because you can still shake yourself, it doesn't mean that you're still strong. Just because you can shake yourself, it doesn't mean that you're still strong. It just means that you can move. That's all it means. But then, there's another but that we need to consider, and that's about grace, because grace still grows even in places where strength has died. And God is still writing even when the chapter seems as though it's over. So we move to 32 now, 22 rather, of chapter 16. We're still in Judges. It says here, but the hair on his head began to grow back after it had been shaved off. This is the gospel in one verse. Even in defeat, even in blindness and bondage, God's mercy still moves. So his hair began to grow back, and we jump all the way down to verse 28. And in verse 28, it says, and Samson called to Yahweh and said, my Lord, Yahweh, remember me. Please give me strength this one time, O God, so that I can repay with one act of revenge to the Philistines for my eyes. And Samson reached out and held two pillars of the middle, of which the house was resting, and he leaned on them, one with his right and one with his left hand. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all his strength, and the house fell on the rulers and on all of the people who were there with him. And the dead whom he killed in his death were more than those he killed in his life. Your hair can grow again. And failure doesn't cancel purpose. It refines it. Many of you here, many of us here, we have failed. Let's be honest. We have failed, but it doesn't have to be said of us that we are still failing. We have failed. Many of us have failed as fathers. Many of us have failed as brothers, uncles, just men in general. Human beings, talking to our women folk, many of us have failed. But it doesn't mean that we have to continue to fail. Because this says, but his hair began to grow again. Your hair can grow again, and failure doesn't cancel purpose, it refines it. So Samson lost his strength, but he found his soul. He lost his sight, but recovered his mission. And in his final act, he wasn't acting from ego, but from repentance. For every man that's here today, you may be bruised, but you're still breathing. And if you're breathing, it means one thing, that God is not yet finished with you. So we have therapy, we have prayer, we have confession, we have brotherhood, and these are tools of resurrection. You don't need to die in Delilah's lap. Amen, Lisa. You don't need to die in Delilah's lap. There is a purpose beyond your pain. I remember growing up. Yeah, still growing up. I remember asking, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Because, we have those existential problems. And that question became true for me when I was at a point in my life that I thought I should have been doing significantly better. You were managing a department that had about 54, 60 persons. They all depended on you, and you had other departments that you had to oversee. And that's when I found the time to be wondering, what is my purpose? Which never makes sense. Because sometimes when you're crippled by some of those hurts, the baggage from the past, the trauma from the past, you're not sure where to go. You know you're moving, but that's just motion. You don't see the meaning, and you wonder, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? And instead of performing and doing what you know ought to be done, you're doing that to some extent, but you realize that when you go to your bed, you can't sleep. And when you finally think it's about time that you're falling asleep now, it's time to get up. And so you walk around like a zombie, and you still have that question lingering in your head, this thing gnawing at the back of your mind. Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And sometimes, just sometimes, you lose out on just life. You know, I remember, and I started questioning a number of things. I remember being at the hospital looking for a family friend, a relative rather, and a cousin. I don't know all my cousins because there are too many. And she saw me and she said, oh, you know, you look like you're supposed to be in some big shot job and this and that. And we're there laughing and jousting. And she said, you know, I'm going to pray for you. Usually when people say they're going to pray for me, one eyebrow come up and I start looking at you. Funny, because what's so special about you? Why you just need to pray for me? But yeah, she and God different. But she wanted me to pray, or she wanted me to stand there while she prayed. And when she started to pray, she reached out to touch my head, and we kind of weird. Growing up, you don't make nobody put them on the crown, the crown. No, you know. And she did that, and I did like Matrix, and she said, no, man, you know. God told me to pray, and then I couldn't close my eyes during the prayer. And she prayed a hell of a prayer. And when she finished, she said, there's something here that you need to let go. And I said, what? She said, you need to cough. Church, me never have no cough, you know. So she said, you need to cough. You need to do it again. You need to do louder, because there's something bottled up in here that you need to let go of. Because once you're able to let go of that thing, then there's nothing to stop you. I mean, I look upon her like, all right, I'm not sure which juice you drink before you reach, but something did in there. And long and short, we coughed, you know, and I was humoring her with cough. and I remember shortly after that getting a WhatsApp message with a job posting, and I applied for the job. Well, I called first. Yo, this real? Yeah, man. I applied for the job. And when I applied, about 10 minutes after sending in my application, I got a call. And I was on the call for about 45 minutes. And when I was almost finished, I asked if this was the interview. She laughed and said, no, this is just me hearing about you and all of that, because your resume was impressive. And I was thinking, I wasn't sure how impressive it was, because if you look at it, yeah, you know, some I go to church. If you don't know nothing else about me from the resume, you know I go to church. So certain questions you will not ask me in an interview. Never have I been in an interview when somebody say, so Kwame, Mr. Thomas, do you have a problem working on a Saturday? You're not going to ask me that. Because you know that I check this, I do this, I do that, I do this. All on Saturday. So I'll tell you that my commitment is there. So long and short, we went through the interview process. I went there now. And for this interview, I saw a former minister of education. I saw a member of the High Court. We saw a whole heap of other persons. And obviously, I was nervous. But there's a thing about being interviews. You know when you have gotten this thing, right? Right? No, me no. When I go into an interview and I sit with you and I am coming out, I can look back and say, my own that. It's just a matter of time before they call me. All right? And I remember coming out of that room with a smile on my face because the only thing they're going to call me to say is, when can I come back? I'm sure. And I saw the other candidates, and I went around there, and I thanked, they say, good luck on the interview, and I gone, So I went out there, and I told them good luck on the interview, and I stepped out. And then I got the call. Mr. Thomas, we want you to start working 2 weeks from now. But where I was working, you needed to give them 6 weeks notice. So they want me in 2 weeks, they need 6 weeks notice. So that was a predicament. Sending the resignation, and I was asking about secondment. And I asked a friend, what if I ask about secondment instead? And while being on secondment, then I can just slowly transition over. And she said to me, just let go. If you let go, why you hold on? Just let go. And it so happened that I sent the resignation, and it was accepted without punishment, without anything saying that I need to remember that. Because I was there for roughly 15 years. Don't worry, I started working young. But long and short, on this new job, what started to happen, because back then I was in leadership, and in this place I was also in leadership. But the difference was that I was looking for serpents under every stone. I didn't know who to trust. I didn't know what to think, because everyone looked as though they were afraid of something. And so it's just a matter of time, before a little bit of water just started coming over the edge of the ship. And I thought that it was paranoia. And between setting up meetings, going out, doing all of this, observing certain things and people, you started to lose sight of who you are. Because if any of you know me, you know that when I go into a room, and it's not to boast, when I go into a room, I think that I'm supposed to be here. My space is here until I leave. So I'm never going to be one of those persons who go in the room and I feel small. No, I don't care who the guy. Me supposed to be here. And when I'm not supposed to be here is when I have left. And you might call it arrogance, but if my father is a king, then that makes me royalty. And if you don't recognize that your father is a king and you are also royalty, it means that you have a problem, and it's a you problem. So many times as Christians, when we step into a place, we step out of God's grace because of the fear that we have, and we go in there and we think that we are less than. When we are called to be there and not there, but we go in this way. And many of us, because of that, we find ourselves in Delilah's lap. Delilah comes in with her nice, fine self. Because she must have looked good, She must have looked good. Because if she never looked good, and Samson got through all of that, and she never looked good, something wrong with Samson. But we know how God made men. For the most part, we see things, and if it looks attractive, then we move. And so she came at an opportune time. She came with sugar or honey on her lips and something else somewhere else, but she had her scissors outside of his sight. I won't say that. So she came. And so being confused, being consumed, being blinded by what he thought was lust, or love rather, that feeling in his stomach, that he probably never eat. And it was gas. And so he thought that it was something else. He saw her as refuge, but the one that he was running from was himself. Because he was a big ball of unchecked emotions and impulse that he didn't submit to God. So when it was time for him to stand before her, it wasn't difficult for her to unravel him. So no matter how strong you be, no matter how strong you be, there's all, you remember the saying that we have, every hoe of them stick a bush? That's good and that's bad. That's good and that's bad, because it's good in that we understand that there's something for you. Let's leave it at that. But it's bad in that no matter how strong you think you are, there's always that one person who can just find their way right up under your skin. And that was Delilah. So to the men here, who are the Delilahs that you are dealing with daily? And the intention or the expectation is not that you will point at a woman. No. You will point at an issue that you have not surrendered to God. Because if Samson had surrendered, then Delilah would have been of none effect to him. First of all, he would not have seen the need to go to Timnah and see this young woman and say, she pleaseth me well. He would have brought his own son to the beach. Yes, he would have brought his own son to the beach. But because he was unchecked and he never surrendered to God, he went looking for something where there was nothing to be found. And so, an idle mind is the workshop of who? Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. That job, long and short, I remember as we wind down to the end, I remember being there and thinking, and I would have shared this testimony already. What would it feel like, or what would it be like if I was no longer here? Because my safe space is work, home, school, church. Because of the demands of the job, I stopped school. And home wasn't as comfortable as you wanted it to be. And so two of your anchors were gone. Work, stressful. So that's gone. And so you figure that if 75% of the things that you held on to give you strength were missing, why not just sacrifice the other 25% to see what would have happened? And I remember friends walking out and going for lunch. Where I bought lunch, if I didn't cook, because I prefer to cook or have something cooked at home, it was about a mile from where I was. And I was walking out, and you still had the same smile, because that's my resting face. And I looked at the stoplight, and the stoplight just changed to green. And I saw a truck coming. And I said, what if I just stepped out, just one step? Because the truck was coming fast. What would that be like? And curtains. I remember stepping out, friends, and stopping. And I remember going like this. And I see the truck, and I see the light, and I see the truck again. And the driver looked for me, he looked for the light. I looked at him, and I looked at the light. And I just walked. And I started laughing. Because that was saying to me that God wasn't yet finished. Even if you are finished with him, he's still going to give you another opportunity to show you or to see that he was not yet finished with you. And believe it or not, probably it's just my mind, but when I was walking down, every light was on green. So even if I rolled in the road in that particular direction, there's nothing to stop me. And I went, sat down, had a bowl of soup, red ring. That's when they blend out the peas. And I sat and I had the soup, and I walked back, and same light, everything green. And I sat in the office, and I asked the question again, why me? Why now? Why here? Because I didn't want to be having that meltdown at this point of my life. Because I'm now thinking, because of this particular job that I had, I could have started to save and buy a house and buy this and buy that and do a whole heap of things, fix up myself. You know, like you broke out of brokenness. That was it. You know, and there was a particular kind of thrill that came. I remember going into the bank. And I stepped in as just somebody in suit because he had to wear this every day. And the security seemingly was about to give me a hard time until the manager came around and escorted me in. But when I was coming out, there was a gate in my step that I was, you know, watch Jefferson, I was all over the place. And I was stepping high because I went and paid off my student loan. Just pay it off, and there was an exhilarating feeling because that had happened. But now I'm back at this place where I'm wondering, why here, why me, why no? And I remember going to a high school because they invited me the next day. No, the next day they invited me to deliver a speech. I don't know why they called me, but I guess they knew why they did. And on that podium, I remember telling a group of students that they must make it. And I went through all the reasons why they ought to make it and why they ought to become something successful. While I was on the podium telling them, I felt like a hypocrite because I was telling them lies. Because in my mind, I was thinking, what would be the next opportunity for me to not be there? And I got selfish because I wasn't thinking about my siblings or anybody. I was just thinking about me and this issue that I was having that I couldn't deal with because I didn't know who to talk to. So long and short, I went in, I wrote a resignation letter, or sent out the resignation letters rather to every church, all offices in church. I got a call from an elder. You know, send this to pastor yet? No, keep it. I said, why? No, man, keep it. Me and you need to talk. And we started on that particular process. Long and short, there was one resignation letter that I had sent that I didn't call back, and that was for the job that I had. And somebody said, boy, you can't give up that job there, no, because the job is good. And I asked the question, the person who was here before I came, where is he, and why did he leave? Because that wasn't a question that I asked, you know, during the interview, and the person looked, oh, him dead. It sounds funny, but it's him dead. You know, this was somebody who we went to he was a couple of years ahead of me, but he was from the same high school, and him dead. And so I said, what kill him? Well, him just go sleep one day, and him just still asleep. I guess him did tired. I did not think I had the support system that I needed to have while being on that job, because inherently there was nothing wrong with the job. But it was demanding. Someone looked at me and told me, said, Mr. Thomas, you have to pay attention. You see, this job is very stressful, but at the end of the month when you see your salary, you're going to smile because it was all worth it. There was some amount of truth to that, you know, because when I was writing up the tithe envelope, I felt good dropping it because it's like, it heavy, yeah. And when you put it in, because I remember being here saying, oh, you know, I remember when we just came around here and we weren't yet over this side. As a matter of fact, it's the week when we came over this side. I remember being right here saying, I want a job that would allow me to return at least $50,000 per month for tithe. Do the maths. And I had 65,000 returning, and then you want, because I mean, because I can return 65, it means might as well let us round this off so that you can get a reasonable offering. So you throw some more and say, yeah. Because it wasn't about the money. But the issue was no, I did not feel as though I had the support that I needed to have. And many of us here today as men and women, we're in positions, not necessarily at work, but positions in our homes where we don't feel as though we have the support that we need to carry on. And so when we lie down in bed, we ask the question, why am I here? Why am I here? And many of us, when we go out into the work world or anywhere, we look for Delilah so that we can put our head in her lap, so we can get some comfort. Because sometimes the only thing Delilah do is listening. Delilah not talk. Sometimes Delilah only listens. Because you think that you're confiding in her so that you can get the support that you need, but Delilah is listening so that she can get that one bit of information. What can I do to unravel this person some more? Because in Eden, or just outside of Eden, when God saw Cain and he said to him, as I close, why has your countenance fallen? Do you not know that if you do that which is right, you will be accepted? But if you do not, sin lieth at the door. In the Hebrew, sin was like a tabby cat, a little kitten that you could play with. But when you fast forward to the New Testament now and you see Peter talking about that same sin, this is now a roaring lion going around to see who it can devour. So I'm telling you, brethren and friends, I'm telling you men, I'm telling you women, that Delilah uses both tactics, but Delilah will be that place of comfort you go to, you confide, you unravel the mysteries of your minds. And then when the time comes, snip, snip. So, to the one man or woman in there that's struggling in silence, I'm going to invite you to come. To the father or the brother or the sister that feels unseen, I'm going to invite you to come. To the man who has failed, to the woman who has failed, but still believes, I'm going to invite you to come. Because there's something that you need to understand. You are not your mistake. There's a difference between the two. You are not your weakness, and you are not alone. In the same way that we looked in Judges 16:22, it says that, but the hair on his head began to grow again. Let your hair grow again. Come. Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. This altar here is for everyone trying to hold it together. This is a sacred space for tears, for truth, and most importantly, for transformation. This altar is not perfect. So I want you to get that. This altar is not perfect. It's not for the perfect, but it's for the tired. It's for the real, and it's for the ready. I am here today and hopefully for the rest of the month because someone saw the need to pray for me. Sometimes they didn't pray with me, but they prayed for me. And some even went as far as to pray with me. And so I want to extend that same opportunity. There's somebody here that's struggling, somebody online that's struggling. You might have failed, but you're still not failing. You have failed.
Someone is praying for you. So when it seems you're all alone and your heart is breaking too, remember someone is praying
as far as prayers go, we have a duty, friends. We have a duty to pay it forward. Because someone has prayed for you to be here today. So you now should pray for someone else. Too often when we go to God, we go to Him asking for what we can have for ourselves. What if we prayed for someone else? What if we prayed and asked God to strengthen the hand of someone who might be suffering in silence? What if we surrendered so that He can use us? So unlike Samson, when we get up, we're getting up in His power so that we can do His will and fulfill His purpose.
And your heart will break in two. Remember, someone is praying for you.
Last week, as I'm about to pray, I asked the question, what fence are you stuck on? This week I'm asking, is it that you might be blinded by what you call love, when in fact you're bound by lust? Something that's attracting you, but at the same time it's pulling you away from God, from your purpose. The overarching question in all of that is, what are you standing on? That's the theme for the month. What are you standing on? Are you standing on the promises that God has made? Or are you finding your own foundations on which to stand?